Hey everyone, my name's Alexandra and I'm a watercolor artist. Today I want to show you guys some do's and don'ts when you're painting natural looking watercolor leaves. Let's get started. If you guys are wondering what supplies I'm using today, I've listed them below. Otherwise, we're just gonna dive right in. I have two different papers here. On the left is gonna be what we want to do with painting leaves. Right is gonna be what we don't want to do. To start, I'm gonna start with our page on the right here. I am going to draw my line that I can use to paint my leaves with. So I've drawn a super straight line here, and I'm just gonna jump straight in and paint some leaves. So I'm going in with my green paint. Now, the first thing that I often notice people doing when they're painting leaves, and when they're new to painting with watercolor especially, is what they'll do is they will draw the shape of the leaf and then they'll just try to fill it in with their paintbrush. So this isn't always the worst thing, or it doesn't always end up looking the worst at the end, but you're not using the shape of your paintbrush to your advantage. So I'm gonna show you guys with our first few leaves on the left-hand side here, how to do it instead. So what you wanna do is you wanna put the tip of your paintbrush down and apply pressure as you're pulling back. I'm just gonna get a little bit more water on there. So I'm using the shape of my paintbrush to my advantage. And you'll notice that by doing this, my leaves just look a lot more effortless. They're more natural looking. And I can actually get really full looking leaves this way. So now I'm gonna continue on the right side with sort of more what not to do with painting watercolor leaves. All right, so let's say I've learned this technique. I'm now using my paintbrush how I want to, and I'm continuing to paint leaves all the way down. So one of the things that I did here, I'm just gonna paint in the stem so that you guys can see, is first of all, when I drew my line for the stem, I drew it super straight. And now, if I go to attach all my leaves to the stem, I did the leaves directly across from each other. So right away, this gives it a super stiff, rigid look. Now, if we go to my painting on the left, what I've done is I've drawn the line with a little bit of a curve. And as I paint the leaves in, I wanna make sure that I'm sort of changing the direction of them so they're not all facing the exact same way. I had a little bit too much water on there, so I'm just gonna pick some up. And then the other thing that I'm doing is I'm staggering my leaves a little bit so that they're not in line with each other. Often when you're looking at leaves in nature, you'll notice that they're not super stiff and rigid like I've done in my photo on the right here. So this way, by sort of changing the direction that they're facing, by alternating where on the branch they are, right away it gives it so much more of a natural look. So now when I go in to attach the leaves to my main stem, I can paint my really little lines, and instead of having them being super stiff and straight, I'm gonna kind of curve them down towards the stem. So I do have a tutorial that's a little bit more thorough on how to paint this basic watercolor leaf. So if you guys want some more details on this, then feel free to check that out. But I just want to show you guys some super key differences between the two. So right away, you can see how much more natural this one is looking versus how stiff this one is. So the next thing is adding details to it. Say if I wanted to add some veins to my leaf, I'm gonna do it with the one on the right. So I'm going in with the darker green, and I'm just gonna paint in So I'm doing my vein down the middle and adding the little ones all the way along. It's harder to see on the darker leaves, but you'll be able to see it more here. So one thing that I did with painting this leaf is sort of what I just talked about when I was talking about painting the actual leaves. When we're painting the veins, if you keep them all super straight, super rigid, it just gives it, yeah, again, more of a rigid look. So with our leaves on the left here, I'm going to show you guys a little bit of a different way to do it. And for this, you guys can definitely grab a smaller paintbrush, but I'm going over with green, and I'm going over with a green that's not as dark as the one that I used on the right-hand side. And what I want to do is I want to give super fine lines, and I sort of have them, sorry, I have it a little bit too light there. We'll go a bit darker. And I sort of have them curving along the shape of the leaf. And then, like I did when I was painting my leaves on this side, I have them staggering a bit. I don't have them all super straight, super stiff. They all have a little bit of a curve just to give it more of that natural look. And we're just gonna paint them all the way down. So I'm using a bigger paintbrush here. You guys definitely can grab a smaller paintbrush for this and just get those really fine details. So you'll notice too, by doing a super subtle color difference, that it just gives it a really nice natural look. So then, because it's so subtle, even if I happen to paint the lines a little wider like I did with that last leaf, it doesn't stand out so much that it bothers the eye. It's just really natural. All right, so you can see between the two leaves, there's very clear differences that are super, super simple switches to make, especially if you've already been painting watercolor leaves for a while, of just adding more of a looseness to your painting. So one other thing that I often will do is I'll add in some secondary colors into my leaves. So just to give them more depth. So with this leaf here on the left, what I could do is I could go in and add a little bit of a yellow tone. And if I want, I could just paint it over top of part of my leaf. So it's a super, super subtle addition. But what it's gonna do is it's just gonna make that green stand out that much more. So again, you won't notice anything too crazy by adding this, but you'll just see that really subtle addition. So if I wanted to as well, when I painted the leaves initially, while it was still wet, I could go in with another color and just add it in using the wet on wet technique. But I like to do this with my leaves just because, again, it adds to the natural look of it. With my leaves on the right here, I did use greens that I like, but often just to add that little bit of extra dimension is going to bring it to life. All right, so I have just shown you guys some do's and don'ts when you're painting with watercolor leaves. If you guys are going to take anything away from this, what I want you to stop doing is painting really stiff, rigid, uniform leaves, and just start allowing more movement in your painting and having the leaves face different directions, having them flow more naturally. So that's one of the biggest things, one of the biggest takeaways with painting watercolor leaves. If you guys have any other questions or anything else that you want to see me do a similar video on, then leave a comment below and let me know. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel, make sure to like this video, and I'll see you next time.